they give off a glare and you can't see anything.
Brad, let me know when I'm good to start.
All right, let's let's wait until the counter slows down a bit, and then you can start.
Absolutely.
We have someone commenting, Meg, hello from Texas.
There we go.
Hey, Meg.
Got to ask you about Brady leaving. Is that a trauma in Boston?
That's a sore subject, Fredrik.
Yeah, Rob, you can answer that.
Yeah, the staff yesterday dressed up with Patriots, and I explicitly told everyone no Tom Brady jerseys anymore. We're still in denial up here.
All right. Yeah, I get that. It's not my brother-in-law lived in Ireland, and all Irishmen they follow all Boston sports. It's a stereotype, but it's true. Like everyone in Ireland roots for the Boston teams, and they're all upset about it. And they live in Ireland, so I can only imagine what it's like in actual Boston. My brother-in-law he's been. I can't talk to him. My sister had to tell me, like, you can't joke about this, Fredrik. It's serious. You can't make jokes about it. You know, you can't text him writing about this because he gets really upset.
Yes. This was not the way I wanted to start this webinar, but yes.
But here we are.
Here we are. Speaking of Boston, though, and speaking of Irish, I will say, Fredrik, that the Boston Celtics won Game 7 last night, and they're moving on to they're moving on to the Eastern Conference Eastern Conference Finals. So good news there.
From Toronto. I think it's slowed down. We're still going up, but we're slowed down. So why don't you get us started, Robert?
Great. Thanks so much, Brad. Really appreciate it. All right. So folks, you're going to unfortunately have to listen to me for 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll get to the good stuff. So just good morning, and thanks for being here with us for the next hour to hear from international best-selling author Fredrik Backman. My name is Robert Hayes. I'm the Community Outreach Librarian and Head of Technical Services here at the Tewksbury Public Library. I want to make a few quick points before turning things over to Joe and Fredrik. So first, I'd like to thank everyone behind the scenes who made this event possible. This is a collaboration between 6 North of Boston libraries. I'd like to thank Stephanie from Andover, Lizzie and Sharon from Billerica, Lynn from North Reading, Rebecca from Woburn, and Charlotte, Erin, Emily, and certainly Brad from Wilmington. I'd also like to thank Ariel from Simon & Schuster and Jane from Wellesley Books. Second, just wanted to point out that this event is actually the start of a long series of virtual visits from best-selling authors that the 6 libraries are hosting. We already have 4 author visits booked in September and another 4 booked in October. I'll spare you all the details, but I will note that our next virtual author event is with the best-selling author Kyle Mills, and that's next Saturday, September 19th at 10:30 a.m. Kyle, as you might know, took over for the late Vince Flynn in writing the Mitch Rapp series, which is one of the top 3 most popular thriller series in the world. So Kyle will be with us a week from today. Third, we are technically sold out for this morning's event, although we did anticipate some no-shows. That's what happens. If you know someone who wanted to attend, or you have any Fredrik Backman fans in your life, please let them know that this event is currently being live streamed on the Wilmington Memorial Library Facebook page. Fourth, you'll all be receiving a feedback survey shortly after this event ends. Please let us know what you thought of today's event and what you'd like to see for future events. Also in the survey will be a link to buy a copy of Anxious People from Wellesley Books, our bookstore partner, who will ship it to you. You have two incentives to do this. Number one, the book is actually autographed by Fredrik. And number two, the host libraries will receive 15% of each sale. And then finally, just to set expectations, Fredrik and Joe will have a conversation, sort of an interview for roughly 30 to 40 minutes. And then Joe will, at least ask 10 minutes or so of questions from the audience. The plan is to wrap up by 11:30 Eastern Standard Time. And if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A. So we won't be able to see or hear you. So please type your questions into the Q&A function, not the chat function. We'd like all Q&A in the Q&A function. You're happy to chat in the chat function, but questions go in the Q&A function. All right, so finally, let me introduce our two featured guests. First, our moderator, Joe Golden, is a marketing and content strategist for BookBub, which is an ebook discovery platform. She loves reading, talking about, and attempting to write books, and she can't get enough of coming-of-age stories and creepy psychological thrillers. She lives here in Boston with her husband. And finally, our star, Fredrik Backman, is the #1 New York Times best-selling author of A Man Called Uva. My grandmother asked me to tell you she's sorry. Britt Marie was here. Beartown, Us Against You, Things My Son Needs to Know About the World, and two novellas, The Deal of a Lifetime, and Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer. His books are published in more than 40 countries. He lives in Stockholm, where it's currently raining, with his wife and 2 children. So let's all give Joe and Fredrik a big virtual round of applause for joining us here this morning. And Joe and Fredrik, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm seeing everyone sort of say hi from the chat. It looks like we have people from Texas, Amsterdam, California, a lot of Massachusetts, of course, Oklahoma, really all over. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. And Fredrik, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. I'm so thrilled and excited to talk to you today.
Well, thank you for having me.
So first,
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to start by saying one of the joys for me of preparing for this interview and sort of reading more about you was learning about your journey as a storyteller and sort of what you did before writing novels and sort of like how you've evolved as a storyteller. And to sort of start from the beginning, I'm not sure how many of your readers know this about you, but can you talk a little bit about what type of writing you did and what type of storyteller you were before publishing books and how you actually first got into publishing your first novel?
It depends on how far you want to go back, but I did all sorts of things in my early 20s. Did odd jobs and I studied religion for a while, and for a while I was an exterminator for bugs and rats. I worked with that for a while. I worked in restaurants for a while. I drove a forklift for a while in a warehouse. So I did a couple of different things, and then at 25 I decided that I was going to give writing a year. I just had this notion that maybe I could make a living from writing, and I said, well, I'll give myself a year and see if I can get something rolling. And so my friend gave me a job as a forklift driver. I worked nights and weekends, and that so I could pay the rent, and that made me able to send emails to magazines and newspapers. This was at a time where there were actually magazines in the world where you could write. Everything was not online yet, and I said I'll write for free. I sent them emails, and they said, no, thank you. You have no experience. You don't seem like you know anything about what you're doing. And I said, well, I'll write for free, and they were like, all right, we'll find you something. So I did that for a while. I did that for that year about, and then and then I managed to talk my way into someone giving me a proper job in another city in Stockholm. And I moved, and I was a magazine writer for a while, and then I played around with ideas for novels, but I didn't know how to write a novel. I had this idea that novelists know what they're doing, which turns out nobody has any idea what they're doing. Everyone is just fumbling around in the dark anyway. And then we had our first kid, and that's probably when I decided to try and write a novel, because that's when we had our first kid, I just realized, like, there's never gonna be 6 months for me to, like, oh, I'm gonna take this time to write this novel. And up until then, I lived in this illusion that a lot of people do, that oh, there's gonna be a time for me in my life where my schedule is just magically gonna open up. I'm gonna have 6 months, and I'm just gonna focus on my novel. And that will never happen. And when we had our first child, that was when that hit me. Like, I'm never gonna have that time. That's never gonna be given to me. So if I want to write a novel, if this is something that I wanna, if this is the swing that I want to take, so to speak, then I have to go for it. I have to find a way to do it now, because this is never gonna get easier. Sooner or later, this kid is gonna start talking, and we're probably gonna have another kid, and so I figured, like, it's now or never. So I wrote it at nights mostly. The first Amankel Duve is, I would think 80% of that book is written in the middle of the night, while rocking the stroller in the living room. And then I work for magazines during the day, and that's how that book came into existence. And now I'm here.
5 or 6, I guess, many books after that. Can you talk a little bit about, I think for a lot of people, they probably first met you in sort of like A Man Called Ove, of course, your first novel. That's how they sort of discovered you. Could you talk a little bit about, I read that the character of Ove was inspired by someone that you came across through a blog. I think your coworker had written about. Could you talk a little bit about how you created the character of Ove and sort of the inspiration behind that character?
Yeah, but it's the same way that it is with all characters. Everyone always asks if it's, is this character based on a real person? It's the same no matter what novel I'm talking about. It's always people come back to the characters and they ask, is this character based on a real person? And I always say that it's like it's like orange juice. It takes a lot of oranges to make one glass of juice. It takes a lot of real people to make one good character. One character can be 20, 25 real people, and you steal bits and pieces of different people. And my assumption is that most people that you don't know a lot of people in your life multi-dimensional, like deeply. Most people you know one part of them. You know them as a colleague, but you probably don't know them as a parent or as a grandparent or as a neighbor. You only know them as a colleague, and that's one part of them, but that's not all of them. And most people you know are like that. You know them as one aspect of their life, but there are very few. Sorry,
Okay.
my phone. My kids have friends over, and now their parents are calling me, and
Double duty.
yeah, it's yeah, we have the house full of kids today.
You were saying that you
sorry,
don't.
where was I?
No, that's okay. You were saying that you often know people in a one-dimensional way, and that
yeah,
you know
them.
yeah.
You know one part of them, and that's so that's what. So I mean, Uwe is based on. He's based on a lot of people. He's based on a certain type of person that I ran across in several different situations, and I thought that that character just grew in my head. But when you're building a character, what I keep coming back to is that I always have more characters to begin with in a story than I need. I might have 20 characters to begin with and 7 when I'm done, but that's because all of the characters that stay characters to me, that don't evolve into persons to me, I'll have to take them out. As soon as it's just a character, as soon as someone in the story is just there to push the story forward or to serve one element of the story, I have to take that character out. That's my rule. They have to be real people to me. I have to know who they are. I have to get them, and I have to feel for them, and I have to have this sense that I need to protect them and defend them. I have to evolve a character into a person that I feel like, if a critic writes something bad about me or the story, that's fine. But as soon as a critic goes after one of my characters, I get really annoyed, and that's my test always. Will I be annoyed if someone talks shit about this character? And if so, then I'm on to something. And that's my rule. They have to become characters. They have to stop being characters. I have to feel for them. They have to be real human beings to me. Because if they're not real human beings to me, they won't be real human beings to you. That's my only philosophy of writing.
Right. Well, that makes sense. If you feel offended on behalf of your characters, it means you have true feeling for them. So that's interesting to hear how you approach that. I don't know if this is akin to asking a parent if they have a favorite child, but because you have so many lovable characters, I'm wondering, do you have a favorite character from your novels, or a character that you most identify with?
No, but I have a favorite child. That's an easy question. It's the child that didn't fight with me in the car back from football practice today. That's the other child. My favorite child today. No, I don't have. It's a question you can't really. There's no way for me to answer it. I don't have a favorite character. It's the closest I can get to answering a question like that. It's I know Enzo Ferrari, the founder of Ferrari, the car brand, who built sports cars. He was asked at one point or another, what is your favorite project? What is your favorite car? And his answer was always the next one. And that's the only answer I can give. If there's ever a point for me when I feel like it's not the next one, and I'm starting to think about what I've achieved in the past, then I think it's time for me maybe to retire from writing and go find a normal job. You have to be obsessed with the next thing you're doing, otherwise you're on the wrong track, I think.
That makes sense. So one thing I was excited to talk to you about with Anxious People, to turn to the book at hand, is the characters in Anxious People, because there's a lot of characters, and in hearing your process, this makes sense. They all have very singular voices, and they're very distinct. And I'm interested to hear a little bit about constructing characters in this novel, and if you started with many, it sounds like, and cut them down, and sort of like how these voices emerged, and how you constructed the characters in this novel.
But it starts with thinking a lot. That's what I keep coming back to when aspiring writers ask for advice. One of the questions that I often get is, how do you set aside time for writing? What is your writing process? What are your writing habits? And I always come back to, don't worry about the writing. Worry about the thinking. Because it's not because some people talk about writer's block, and I can get that to a certain extent, but I think some of it sometimes is that people sit down. They early on in my career, I trained myself when I was a magazine writer, because I figured that maybe this is going to be an issue for me. So I trained myself to write anywhere. That was an exercise I gave myself. So I trained myself like I have to be able to write at a bus stop, or at a busy cafe, or in the middle of the street. I have to be able to shut everything out. I have to teach myself how to concentrate anywhere, because I was afraid to get to that place that I know a lot of writers do. You build your perfect little writing cave, and it's going to be great, and I'll have flowers, and there's going to be inspirational quotes on the walls, and the lighting is perfect and everything. That's going to be great, but you're going to be there for like 30 minutes every 3 months. It's not. There are so few times that you can put yourself in that position, and that's how that's how I go about writing. That most of the writing is done in your head, and then as you sit down, you're like, oh, I sit down and nothing comes out of the fingers. Yeah, well, it's not the fingers doing the writing, it's your brain. You have to think. You have to live with this story, and figure everything out before you sit down. I think people might sit once in a while. I think established writers might do aspiring writers a disservice sometimes by kind of upholding a myth that everything just comes to you. It doesn't, but you have to think. So what I do, I walk around thinking about these characters for a long time. They live in my head for a long time. And usually while I'm writing one book, the characters of my next book are already living in my head, and I play around with things. And that's why the next book feels like it's not work, because those characters are still that's just fun. That can still go anywhere. Anything is possible. While the book I'm writing right now, that box is closing in on me, and I'm like, well, I can't do that because that happened, and that character can't go there because that, and I'm closing on it to the end in the book. And so I'll always have one book that I'm writing, and maybe 1 or 2 or 3 books that I'm thinking about and playing around with in my head. And so the next book is my little vacation project in my head when the writing of this one gets too much. So the characters, anxious people, they might have been living in my head for 3 years when I started writing the novel, and then they evolve as I'm starting to work on the story. They evolve because I feel, what would that character do in this particular situation? Or what kind of, how does this person talk? Because I always try to find little things in a person's way of talking that I could fit into dialogue, that hopefully, without making it too obvious, hopefully you'll feel. If I'll show you a piece of dialogue and don't tell you who's talking, if you've been reading the novel, hopefully you'll feel, oh, that's the voice of that character, and that's the voice of that character, because they use different, they what do you call it? Intonation? Do you call it that in English?
Yes.
Yeah. They'll emphasize different words. They use different words. They have, they have different grammar, little things that I can give them to just make them feel real. And I do that with everything. I tell you very little about how people look, for example. That's
right,
because I'm not very good at it to begin with. I don't describe people well. I would make like a horrible witness. My wife tells me this all the time, because my wife, when she asks me, like, I'm talking about a parent at school or whatever, and she's like, well, what does she look like? What does he look like? And I can never explain. Like, what was she wearing? I don't know. What were your kid wearing this morning? I have no idea. If my kid disappears and the police ask me what was she wearing, I don't know. Clothes. Because these are not the things that get stuck in my mind. But I do remember, like, the way someone walked, or the way they talked, or the way, they always have this little thing, or a little mannerism they have, or a little thing that they keep coming back to, or something annoying that they do that I noticed that no one else noticed. These are the things. This is how I view people. So that's how I describe them writing, and then hopefully you'll cast them in your head. You'll give them a look. You'll cast them with, with an actor in your head, and that's probably going to make it more real if you do that. And I don't tell you too much about how they look, but I give them. So I try to tell you. I try to define characters for you by often enough their emotions, their relationships to others, like what are they to other people, how do other people view them, and the way they talk, and little mannerisms. These are the things that I try to define people by.
That makes
if
sense.
That makes sense.
It does, and it comes across in your writing. And I hope that you never have to be called to be a witness in hearing your reflections.
No, I would be terrible. I also don't remember the colors of things. People ask me like the color of a car. I have no idea.
Interesting. So in hearing your reflection there, and in hearing how you sort of have characters in your mind as you're thinking, as you're writing a current novel, and sort of, thinking ahead to those characters, or that being sort of your vacation thoughts. Can you talk about, I feel like the hook of Anxious People, in that it's a bank robbery gone wrong, is such a distinct catalyst or a distinct event. And I'm wondering, like, where did the first seed of this novel come from? Did it start with characters and then you were figuring out a way to get them together? Did it start with that specific event and then pulling characters in? Could you talk a little bit about how this, like the very beginnings of this novel started?
No, in this particular novel, it started with, everything to me, every novel I've ever written, I think starts for me with the emotion I would like you to have on the final page of the book. That's when I start out writing, that's my goal, that's my end game, that's where I'm going. Everything I do is to set you up for that emotion that I want you to have for 30 seconds when you close the books after the final page. Because I imagine I have 30 seconds of your life right there where it's something intimate, where it's something, we have a common bond. I told you a story, and at the end you close the book and you feel something for 30 seconds, and then you're interrupted by, life or whatever, or your kids or your pets or something in the street, or your phone rings or whatever. But we have like 30 seconds and then it's gone. Then, you move on to other things. But those 30 seconds are that's what I write for. So I start with that. I usually begin with the characters. The characters are the people in the book are always the most important to me. I'll build the story around the people, not the people around the story. That's the only way I know how to write. But in this particular case, and once in a while, I'll get an idea of a premise. That's usually, the premise is when I get a premise, I might already have a cast of characters. I'll have this group of characters in my head for a long time, and then I'll get a premise, and I'll say, oh, it would be funny if this cast of characters were in this particular situation. That could work. And in this case, it was just, this story is basically three things. It's a comedy because I wanted to write a comedy this time around. I had written Beartown and Us Against You, two more serious dramatic books, and I wanted to write a comedy. I wanted it to be funny and entertaining. I wanted it to be a relationship drama because everything I do is relationship drama. I could write about an alien bug species who don't even have a language, lives in our planets. I'd still make that a relationship drama. I'd figure something out, and it would still be about the relationships of the family of bugs. That's just my theme. I'm always going to come back to that because I'm only interested in relationships and emotions. That's the only thing I care about. And the third thing that I wanted to do with this particular novel was I was trying to write a closed room mystery, like a classic locked room or closed room mystery. And as that ended up, then that it's a failed bank robber who runs from the police, runs into an apartment where there's an open house realtor viewing going on. The bank robber takes everyone hostage, and you're told in the first couple of pages in the book that this hostage situation will go on for a couple of hours. The police will surround the building, and then the bank robber will give up, let everyone go. But as the police is entering the apartment, the robber is gone. And then the rest of the book is the police interrogating these highly annoying, dysfunctional, anxious people who were hostages, trying to get them to explain what really happened inside the apartment. And that's where, you know, the comedy starts to unfold. And because these are highly, highly annoying people, and because these are the people that I enjoy in life. And so that was my goal, that was my aim. And you know, the original idea just came from the fact that my wife and I, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, we were out looking at new apartments. And so we went to, like, I don't know how many apartment viewings, like open houses. And in Sweden, all apartment viewings are always open houses. There's like 2 dates that you can go and look at each apartment. So it's always a bunch of people there. And I figured out fairly quickly that, I don't really care about where we live. You know, I love my wife dearly, but I don't care where we live as much as she does. So we looked at 3 apartments, and I was like, all of these are fine by me. These are all good. I can live in either one. And then we looked at like 36 more, and I was like, they're all fine. They're all fine. I could live in either one. I don't care. And so I started looking at people instead, because whenever we came into an apartment, I'm like, how are we liking this, honey? Do we want to live here? Because, you know, it's fine by me, but how do we feel? And I started looking at people, and I had this feeling like everyone is your natural enemies at a open house.
Yes.
Your competitors. I know everyone is also really anxious. Everyone is, you know, it's a very, looking at a new place to live is that's a difficult time in a person's life, because you have to ask yourself a lot of questions. Like, you have to question your relationship. Like, is this a good step for us? Can we afford this? Is this the neighborhood where we want to live? Is this our identity? Are we comfortable being these kind of people? What are the neighbors like? Do we want to have kids here? Could the kids grow up here? What's the school district like? You know, should we live in an apartment? Maybe we should have a house. Are we house people? Are we apartment people? Are we ever going to get a pet? Right. You have all these questions all of a sudden. Everything is on the line all of a sudden, like, because you see yourself there for 5-10 years, maybe the rest of your life. And I just find that, that's a good place to start for me to explore human beings and their dysfunctional relationships. But I also had that feeling when I was walking around, it would be really funny if everyone got locked in here in this room and everyone had to like coexist. And then I had this idea, like a hostage situation at an open house, that was just funny to me. So that's where it began.
And it was funny in the book too. And it makes sense how you talk about it. It's true that looking for apartments, looking for homes, it sort of cuts to someone's identity. So it's really interesting to hear you talk through that. You talk about how these characters are very dysfunctional, and you call them annoying, and that's what makes them humorous. And also for me, what made them real. All of their anxieties felt so real to me. And one theme you've continued to explore throughout your writing is mental health, anxiety. And that's really, I would say, central to a lot of your books, but here, it's also at the forefront in naming this anxious people. Can you talk a little bit about exploring anxiety through your stories and why you chose to make it sort of like central in this book?
I think it's, you're touching on it there, that it's a common theme in all of my books. I think I write a lot about anxiety. I've never met a really good writer, like someone I've never met a creator of anything, like it can be music, art, books, anything that I like, that who has created something that I really felt something about, who's not anxious. I mean, all of the people, everyone that I admire, look up to, who has created something that I feel something for, like a genuine feeling, struggle with, you know, self-esteem and anxiety and all of these things, because people, my theory is that people with good self-esteem, people who are balanced and in order and who has their shit together, they don't have that need to go explore the inner workings of their emotions. They also don't have that need to, you know, to shout something to the world. They don't have that need to be like validated, that you do as an anxious person. And that's where creativity usually comes from. If you're a highly functional human being, you don't have that need to be creative because you don't have anything you need to run away from. But creativity is usually an escape from reality. And if you really enjoy reality, you don't have that need to escape from it. And that's why, you know, that's why the most popular kids in school are usually not going to be writers or musicians or artists. That's not, they're going to work with different things, because they liked reality. They worked in reality. So you know, it comes from that. It comes from, you know, some of it is that I find it, you know, there's a lot of comedy to be found in anxiety and the way that people deal with it. You know, I've struggled a lot with depression. I have a lot of friends who struggle with depression. I mean, suicide is a common theme in a lot of my writing. It's one of those things that keeps coming back in all of my, not all of my writing, but a lot of my writing touches at suicide at one point or another. It's not that I plan out to do it. It's not that I set out to write about it. It's just one of those things that keeps coming back. And in Anxious People in particular, that's something that comes up in the story. And it's a subject in A Man Called Ove. It's a subject in Beartown, in parts of Beartown. It's one of those things that I think keeps coming back. And part of that is that I'm interested in the way that people function. I'm interested in what makes people jackasses and messy troublemakers, and why people fight so much. I'm interested in that, and you have to go find all of these inner workings. But it's also the fact that someone very close to me ended his life when I was 19, 20 years old, and that's almost 20 years ago. And it never ends for me, and it never ends for anyone who's been through that experience. It never ends. There's not a day when you suddenly feel fine about it. It's not. And it will never make sense. It will never be logical, and it will define you, a part of you, for life. When someone close to you ends their life, it doesn't matter the circumstances. It will define a part of you forever. And I'm still working through that, and that's probably why I keep coming back to it in my books. And in Anxious People, I wanted to touch on the fact that what you as a person are connected to far more people than you think. So what you do affects other people far more than you have the capacity to understand. So when someone ends their life, there's threads to so many people and ripple effects that will go on for years and decades, and for the rest of people's lives. And I wanted to explore that a little bit as well. So it's so that's the drama part. There's a comedy part, there's a drama part, and there's a mystery part of the book. And this is I wanted to go all in on each different part. I wanted to make each of the three parts stand on their own, so to speak.
Well, thank you for writing so honestly and openly about it. I mean, I feel seen in reading your writing because you put so much honesty in how you approach anxiety and mental health. So thank you for that. It really comes across. I could ask you questions all day, but I am looking at the time and I'm seeing that we have a lot of reader questions as well. One that I want to make sure we get to is one of my last questions for you, and Janet wrote in asking this. The first reader question from Janet says, I love your books. What can you tell us about your next book?
It's the third part of the Beartown series. I'm writing it right now. It's taken a little bit longer than I think people around me wanted to. I get a lot of questions about when is it done, especially from my agent. Like, do you have is there a time frame here? But it's the third part of Beartown. I know Beartown is presented like the Beartown trilogy online in a lot of places. I never said it was going to be a trilogy. I think my agent at one point or another told the publisher, sure, we'll let him write 3 and we'll stop him there. But I never said it was going to be 3 books. I never said it was only going to be 3 books. I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to feel about that universe when I finish the 3rd book. But I'm writing the 3rd one now. It's the working title is Those Who Run Towards the Fire. That could change. I changed Anxious People was called Open House until halfway through the script, and then I changed it to Anxious People. Might change the title here too. I don't know. But there's a general idea that it's going to be published early next year in Scandinavia. So that would mean later in the year in the US, maybe late next year. But that depends if I'm able to finish it in time. We'll see about that. Depends on how much free time my kids give me and some other things.
Got it. Well, we're excited for that whenever it comes. Just a quick reminder to everyone, if you could submit your questions via the Q&A rather than the chat. I'm looking through those now. One question that we have from Roberta is, which authors do you enjoy reading?
Well, that's an impossible question for me to answer because I read everything. I have a very hard time relating to people who have like one genre or one thing that they, or like I have these writers that I don't know how to do that. I read everything. Put something in front of me and I'll read it. I mean, if I can deconstruct the question to a question that I actually can answer, then what writer are you most inspired by? That's Astrid Lindgren, who wrote Pippi Longstocking, who's a Swedish children's book writer. She wrote Pippi Longstocking, and she wrote a book called The Brothers Lionheart, which is by far the best book I've ever read. I read it at least once a year, which is it's an adventure children's book about life and death and good and evil and knights and swords and dragons, and it's just a perfect adventure. It has everything, and she's the one I'm most inspired by because she was the one. I mean, first of all, because she was my best friend when I was a kid, because I read all of her books when I was a kid. But she's also this extremely, she could write highbrow literature. She really could. She was immensely talented, but she chose to write in a language that everyone could understand. She always chose, in the choice between 10 words, she would always choose the simplest one, so that everyone would be included. No one would, miss out on the story because they couldn't understand the words or the language or the way it was set up. And that's what I aspire to. I try to use the simplest the simplest possible way to tell you the story, the simplest possible words, and that comes from her.
Awesome. I'm just reading through the rest of the questions. We have a lot of great ones here.
Sure.
One that I want to touch on is from Marcy. She's asking about humor in your stories. And she said, when you write a humorous story, how do you strike the balance between humor and giving the reader a break to laugh and think before getting to the next sharp line?
I don't know. It's intuition, I guess. It's a rhythm thing. It's like dancing or songwriting, playing music. It's a rhythm thing. You just have to write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite and read what you wrote, and you have to read what others write. And a lot of that is, I mean, a lot of the I try to explain, like, it comes back to the thing that I said, it's more important to think than to, don't focus so much on the writing to begin with, focus on the thinking part. Because one of those aspects is when you read something, if you want to be a writer and you read something that makes you laugh, it's good for you to go back and ask yourself, why did I laugh? Like, how did this writer make me laugh? How was this constructed so that I would end up laughing? Because if you go to a stand-up show, I had a comedian who told me, like, if you go to a stand-up show and the comedian makes a joke and 500 people laugh, there might be 3 people in there who are able technically to break down that joke and tell you why everybody laughed. Like, really break it down and tell you, oh, you see what he did? He did this, and then he did this. But what you didn't see is arranged it. And this is, it's a rhythm thing, it's an intuition thing, but it's also a part of training. It's a part of looking what other people are doing. Like, how did they go about this? What was it that they did that made me laugh so hard? They did this, or and I have, I think I go about, in Anxious People, I go about telling a joke the same way I go about telling the mystery. And also the same way I go about telling, making you feel something, because it's all a puzzle that I lay down in front of you. And I have to play with your assumptions, play with your prejudice, right, and have you looking one way while I rearrange something in the background so that I can sneak up on you, and either sneak up, because a joke is making you look one way and then sneak up on you, because that's what makes you laugh. And solving a mystery is the same. I have to make you look one way and then use smokes and mirrors, like, magician on the stage, and then ta-da, have a big reveal. But it's also the same thing, that if I want you to make you feel something, I have to set that up. I have to tell you one part of the story and then sneak up on you with another part of the story that in combination will make you feel something. It's so there's no manual to it. You just have to feel it yourself, and write what's true to you. It's that, if it's the greatest piece of advice I've had about writing. If you're not crying when you're writing it, no one will cry when they read it. That's my only philosophy. If you're not feeling everything when you're writing it, then no one else will feel anything on the other end. It doesn't work like that. It's an extension cord.
That's interesting, because as I was reading Anxious People and laughing at times, I was like, I wonder if you laugh when you write this. And it sounds like you feel everything when you write it.
No, but you have to. It's just you get what you give to it, but you can't. I mean, I'm not going to go too deep into that, but that's the reason. Like, Scandinavian crime is really famous abroad, Scandinavian crime novels are really famous. That meant for a while, because that was so commercial, like how highbrow writers, like writers who were writing other things, would say, "Oh, anyone can write a crime novel. Anyone can write that. That doesn't. No, you can't, because you have to believe it.
Right.
It doesn't matter, like technically, what you're able to do. If you have two singers, one could be the best singer in the world, but if he or she doesn't believe in the song, doesn't feel the song, doesn't matter. You'd rather listen to someone who has less of a voice but feels everything, because you'd rather hear it from someone on the verge of crying as they're singing it than someone who just sings it perfectly, because that's just, you know, that's not art. Art is craft and emotion. It's that when you feel something, it's not just having something perfectly executed, because then, you know, then we can have robots for it. Then it has to be that element of surprise too, and that comes from the human experience, I think.
Right. That makes sense.
If that makes sense.
No, it does make sense, and I feel like that's what everyone's picking up on in your writing, and how you know, people will talk about your writing and say, I'm laughing one moment and crying the next, and it's really interesting and helpful to hear you talk through injecting stories with emotion and feeling it yourself. So thank you for that answer.
Thank you.
We have another question from Scott, to go back to Beartown and your answer there. Scott was asking, the idea of Beartown not ending after 3 books is incredibly exciting. Have you watched the HBO series yet? How does it feel to see your story brought to the screen?
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't know. I'm writing the 3rd part now. As I'm feeling right now, that's potentially the end of the Beartown saga, so to speak. I don't know, but I could at some point, you know, find one aspect of it, or maybe I'll write something that takes place several years later or anything like that. It's always that, you know, you build a world and then I might want to come back to it. I'm not closing any doors. There is an HBO show. I think it premieres in October. I don't know when it's coming out in the US. I know that HBO Europe has it for October 17th or whatever. And I don't know anything about like the regional, if it comes to the US or Canada or something like that. But I haven't watched it. My wife handles, like, because I had a little stress breakdown 3 years ago, where everything just got too much for me, and after that she took over essentially everything that isn't writing books. She handles the business part, the negotiation parts, all of the TV movie rights, together with our agent, and they just put me on a need to know basis. And you know, as it turns out, most of the things that's going on, I really don't need to know. And but it's working out pretty great for everyone. But it's with the Beartown thing, it's complex. It's always strange when you have something that you wrote being adapted into something for the screen, because that's what it is, and that's what I keep telling other writers when we talk about it. You have to remember that it's an adaptation. It's never going to be your work. It's an adaptation for many reasons. Some things that you write won't work on the screen, but it's also that, well, some things that you wrote, that joke is only going to be funny the first time around, or that turn of events is only going to be exciting when you maybe you have to turn it around a little bit for the screen to make people want to watch it again after read the book, and so on and so forth. But in the case of Beartown, I haven't watched it because I'm writing the 3rd part, and I didn't want that to get in my head. And my wife and I have had this philosophy with movie and TV. We have the same philosophy with translators of the books, that we we work really hard to find the best people we can. We try really hard to find directors, producers who really get what I did with the story, who really understand it, who really comes from the same emotional starting point that I did. But as soon as we hand it over to anyone, as soon as we hand the book over to a translator, as soon as a director or producer, are given the rights to explore it for TV or film, we move out of the way. That's been our philosophy. We move out of the way and we try to let people do their job. Because I think creatively that's the only way that makes sense. Otherwise, I'll be in someone's ear, and that's just going to be a compromise. And I don't think that's good. We have to let them run with their vision, and that means their choice might not be my choice, but I believe more in letting someone free creatively.
That makes sense. You sort of answered a couple questions in one, because a few people were asking about translators and your involvement with that as well.
Yeah. Part of my service.
It looks like we have time for one more question. There's a couple questions on sports here, so I want to get one of those in as well. Linda asked, as a hockey mom, I really related to Beartown. Have you ever played hockey or soccer for Britt Marie? Or do you do a lot of research? You really nail the emotions and the lifestyle of these sports.
No, growing up, I think I played every sport almost except for hockey. Because I grew up in the south of Sweden, and I know the American view of Sweden is, there's polar bears everywhere, but it's only like your view of Sweden, your idea of Sweden, that's only like the northern part of Sweden, because Sweden is a very thin country, but it's very tall. Sweden is as big as it's bigger than California, I think. And it's kind of the same shape. Which means the climate is really different. I mean, the climate in San Francisco is really different from the climate in San Diego. And I grew up in the south of Sweden, which means the hockey isn't as big there for natural reasons. The climate is way different. It's not Spain, but it's still, it's not polar bears in the street either. But so what happened was my parents worked a lot. So for me, growing up, I could do every sport that I could get to myself, and hockey just wasn't an option because I couldn't get to the hockey rinks with all the gear. So I just never started playing hockey, but I played everything else. But I did a lot of research. I've never researched anything as much as I researched Beartown. That's why the thank you list at the end of Beartown is that it's a long list, and that's not even a third of the names I actually owe a thanks to. It's so I did do a lot of research, but I also had this sense going into it that maybe it was an advantage writing a hockey novel, because I know so much about sports. I know so much about sports culture, about locker rooms, about all the different emotional aspects of it. So I'm an insider in that way. I write the book as an insider, but since I've never played hockey, I'm an outsider too. So I wrote it both as an insider as an outsider, and I think that really helped me, because then I could view it from everyone's perspective in a slightly different way. And maybe if I had been playing hockey for all of my life, maybe I couldn't have. I don't know.
Yeah, you had a little distance from it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Well, we are right up on time. I want to, just a housekeeping thing, I want to just call out that Rob has added a few links in here for anyone who's interested, where you can buy autographed copies of the list. This is in the chat. And if you want to learn more about BookBub, my company, there's a link in there as well as to next week's virtual author presentation with Kyle Mills. Fredrik, thank you so much for your time. Truly, it's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your wonderful book. I so enjoyed it, and best of luck to you on the next book.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Everyone. Thanks for tuning in.